Okay, and we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 17th episode of the Branch Out podcast, hosted by Vince and Emmanuel.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Hello. And hello again, Arthur. Thanks for being on again.
Thanks for having me.
At such short notice. Yes, today is a beautiful day here in Switzerland. I don't know about
Baking
how
hot.
the snow is falling in Canada, but do you guys...
It's always falling in Canada, isn't it?
It's always falling. But you guys are coming into summer as well, no?
Yeah. We'd probably be similar to Switzerland as far as the actual seasons go.
Right. What is
So-
your sort of day-to-day temp high at the moment?
Where I am fluctuates quite a bit right now, or is fluctuating quite a bit. Generally, I'd say something like 24, 25
Okay,
on a high and maybe 17, 18 on a low.
okay. But you expect it to... What are your summers there like? 30?
Here, particularly, they can be quite hot. So 30 is average for July and August,
Wow.
and you can go as high as 35.
Yeah, okay.
We live there near the Great Lakes, so there's a lot of humidity. So that makes a big difference. In both cold and heat, it makes a big difference.
Are you really close to the US border?
Very.
Okay.
Yeah.
What, it's Ontario, right? Or Toronto?
Yeah, Ontario. Yeah, I mean, that's a big place.
How do you say
Right.
it?
Ontario.
Ontario.
Yeah.
Ontario.
That's probably not how you actually say it. Apparently, it's a native word. If I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that.
Uh-oh.
So yeah, but that's how we say it. Like, if you ask a Canadian, it's Ontario.
Ontario. So I said Ontario. For some reason. It's very British of me, I think.
Ontario. One thing I
Yes.
thought was kind of interesting is how Canadians say Toronto.
Without the T?
Yeah. That
Yeah.
was like, damn, Toronto.
Oh, that T. I was thinking about the first T. Toronto.
Or Ontario.
Or Orano.
The last one. Yeah, no, but I think that's just North American English. For the most part, you're gonna not say your T's. There's certain hard sounds that you're just not gonna say, and hard
Okay.
is in like very prominent, not difficult.
Okay.
Unlearned it from the British.
Yeah, they wouldn't do that.
No.
British, it's the exact opposite. It's Toronto, and you have
Toronto.
to really accentuate the T's.
Very articulate.
Yeah.
Well,
we have an interesting round of topics today. Timely as based on news and events happening in the last couple weeks. So we wanted to talk today about the mass shootings happening in the U.S. and probably in connection with that, the follow-up reactions to that and the talks about more gun control and what everyone thinks about that. So I think usually what we do in this case is ask each other how we came across these events.
Well, first, what did we do today? And it was complete coincidence as well.
Yeah, it was. We went shooting, exercising our Swiss rights.
It's actually Feldschießen Wochenende. So it's the every year there's a weekend that's Feldschießen is translated as field shooting. And all the Swiss are above the age of, from 16 on and up. They can participate for free. And it's a marksmanship competition of the citizenry.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
It is. It's basically, so it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And you basically can go to any of, I don't know how many, there's probably well over 1,000 shooting ranges in the country. And some of them do it a bit more folklorish, so more authentically than others.
More crossbows.
I don't know, actually. But Yeah, and you shoot with well, if you have your own rifle and your own pistol, you can shoot with your own weapons. Otherwise, they also provide weapons for people who don't have their own. And most people shoot with the current military rifle, which is the SIG 550 or the Sturmgewehr 90. I don't know what's Sturmgewehr. Storming
Storm rifle.
Storm rifle.
Stormtrooper.
Like it.
And I think we shot with the P220. I think that's what it was. At least mine was the P220.
Yeah, I was shooting with the same one that he was demonstrating.
Okay.
Or the same model.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you go shooting?
Correct me if I'm wrong. The 220, is that the one that the 226 would be within the family of? Is that the family model of a particular line of handguns, or?
I wouldn't know.
Because I know that the Sig Sauer P226 was the standard issue sidearm for U.S. Special Forces for a very long time in the 80s and 90s.
Yep. I think yes. Those are compared along side by side a lot. The 220 and 226. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a Swiss firearm.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Is Sig Swiss?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I thought it was German for some reason, but I mean, that makes sense.
But I believe since not too long ago, just in the last couple years, I think SIG moved its actual manufacturing to the US.
Oh, okay.
So
it's a good place to be.
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, it's been a good place to be.
Less transportation costs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my daughter also shot today. She's actually been she started with the air pistol before she was 16, and last year she was not 16, but she had shot so well with the air pistol that the what do you say, the person in charge of the pistol shooting department said, no, I'll take care of her and she can shoot with the real one. And so from last year already, from the age of 15, she was shooting with both the real pistol and the real rifle. So this is her second year. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's so great to have that ability to teach your kids to safely use these things and to, be able to have good marksmanship and all that sort of stuff, because it's a part of, it should be a part of basic self-defense or basic self-preservation. And I mean, in Switzerland's case, if I'm not mistaken, it's obviously part of national defense as well, right? The point being, everyone can come out if needed. Yeah,
militia style.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, today was cool like that, and it was total coincidence that it was just Feldschießen fell on this weekend, and this is the weekend that we're doing this topic, so I can still smell the
gunpowder.
Smell the gunpowder in the morning. Nice.
Yeah. And you actually got a medal today for the pistol shooting.
Yeah.
So congrats.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Last year I got for rifle.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this year I was 2 points short of the medal again.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Well, I know who, if I'm in Switzerland when there's a war, I know who I'm hiding with.
Anyone? No.
Yeah. Everyone.
Everyone. We all have bunkers and guns, so we're good. Yeah.
It's just so funny because you if you talk to, and I don't mean to dive into things too quickly here, but if you talk to kind of the hoity-toity leftists of North America, the United States and Canada, they would look at Switzerland as like this ideal place where, everything is just, I don't know how to say it. It's like their ideal, where it's just like super progressive, super forward thinking, super all these things. And when you hear, bunkers and guns, it's not the first place that comes to mind for a lot of people.
Yeah. We keep all the the cows and cheese on top, and then
Yeah. Version.
the chocolate's up here and the ammo and guns are down here.
Yeah.
But funnily enough, I was looking a bit at the it's not very funny, but gun deaths per capita and so on versus gun ownership per capita, and I was shocked to find out that the gun deaths per capita in Sweden are quite a bit higher than in Switzerland, even though they have a lower gun ownership per capita than Switzerland. So it's just one of those things, like, it's difficult to compare, and we'll get into this a bit later, but it's difficult to compare, for example, Switzerland and the United States, because demographics, the size of the place, all that kind of stuff, right? Culture. But two countries that are very comparable, Sweden and Switzerland. I mean, both countries start with SW, so that you have that.
Where the comparison starts.
Some people think they're the same.
This is true. But yeah, so those two are pretty comparable on a lot of levels. So that was interesting to me to see. Anyway, how did we find out about what happened on that fateful day not too long ago? And what was one's first impression?
As per usual, I usually find out about these things on YouTube, just in my recommended, especially things like this, which are just take the whole world by storm. Yeah. So I first heard about the Uvalde shooting, and some people were talking about it in my friends group, in our chat, and then after that, on that weekend, then there was just another bunch of shootings that happened.
What? God, I live under a rock.
No, I think apparently it was special because on that weekend, I don't know the exact number of shootings, but there were like 6.
What?
5 or 6 that just happened on that weekend. But the thing is, I think you have to take that number with a grain of salt, because apparently this year in the US, they've already had something like 250 mass shootings. So, yeah, this is a lot for a weekend, but they've also just like consistently been having them. The Uvalde one was a standout because it was with children and quite a few of them. But yeah, it's not just like, oh, Uvalde shows the problem. No, they've been having a problem. How you want to go about that problem, we'll get into that. But yeah.
What were those other shootings?
I honestly don't know. When they call shooting a mass shooting when there's 4 or more.
3 or 4, yeah.
Victims or participants.
Victims.
Or yeah.
The victims.
I don't know if it necessarily means deaths.
What makes those statistics really difficult to use is that includes every single gang shooting.
Yep.
Every single shootout between gangs. All that is included in there. And when you look at certain areas of the United States, you'll find that there are a lot of those. But it's very restricted to particular areas. It's not something that happens across the country.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know the exact number, we'd have to look it up, but I think out of whatever 200 shootings, probably maybe 5 or 10 are not gang related or crime related, which is a different story.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that because I really hadn't looked into this before. Shame on me. And then I pulled up this thing called I think it's called CPRC, the Crime Prevention something. And it was like a study that someone had done that showed something like 90 plus percent of, what was it, 90 something percent of shootings. Oh, I don't remember now. But if you look up CPRC, you'll see this thing. And in it, he was describing what he defines as mass shooting, and he was using the FBI's definition, and it was that's it there, and it was basically what you were saying is that he doesn't count in his study, he doesn't count all that gang on gang violence because it doesn't speak to the when people hear mass shooting, what they think of is someone going into a shopping mall or a school and just lighting up the place. They don't think about drug lords shooting at each other on the street.
Yeah.
So, but that's one of those things that is, and then I read something from Washington Post or something where they were doing a fact check, and they were like, yeah, okay, there's this CPRC report, and this is how they view mass shootings. But then there's this other study that includes all the gang violence. And the conclusion was that the CPRC was in the wrong to do what they were doing. So it's really...
Well, for that, it depends on your starting point, right? If your starting point is understanding mass shootings aside from gang mass shootings, it's one thing. If your starting point is we don't like guns, we want to get rid of them, and gun culture is bad, then you include everything to do with guns, including gang violence and that sort of thing. So it would make sense. It just depends where you're coming from. Right. But to your point as well, a lot of these shootings, even like there's the gang related, and then there's the ones that may still be gang related, but it's unclear. Over spring break, which I think was March, if I'm not mistaken. I should know that better, but because my kids also had spring break and I can't remember exactly when it was, but I think it's in March. In Florida, there were like a dozen shootings in over a weekend, and when you look at them, almost all of them were whether there's some beef or some gang related reason, some guy just starts shooting into a crowd of other people start shooting back, kind of thing. It's like it's how do I say this nicely? It seems to be particular to a certain demographic, and not common amongst others. But those would also be counted as mass shootings because it's just some random guy opening fire, right? For whatever reason. And we don't usually, when we talk about mass shootings, very rarely do people dive in deeply enough to understand the particulars of any single one, besides maybe some of the really, really big ones, like a school shooting.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because they're pretty much dime a dozen, aren't they? I mean,
those types of shootings, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, it was interesting because I came across a statistic the other day that was showing that they're limited to something like 2% of counties in the United States, which means that 98% of counties don't have this problem, which is a very interesting observation.
So gun violence, based on that statistic, is extremely localized?
I think the term they used was mass shootings. So in this case, those types of shootings, yes, very localized to certain counties, a small number of counties within certain regions in the United States, areas like, for example, Los Angeles County, or certain areas of Chicago, but not all areas of Chicago, that type of thing.
And would these areas be higher in that certain demographic?
I haven't looked intensely into it. I'd be curious. I would be very confident in saying they're very high in gang activity. I could make a guess. I could make a bet, and I bet if I looked it up right now, I'd probably be right. But I'm not sure. I didn't look into it that deeply.
And in Canada, sorry.
I was just saying, I just found that interesting, considering we think of it as an American problem. And again, once you start digging below even just a couple of layers, and obviously there were more layers that I could have dug that I didn't, but even just a couple layers down, you start to realize there are certain commonalities.
And what's the story in Canada?
Canada, okay, for gun laws in general.
Yeah, and gun violence. I'm sure you know about that better than we do.
Well, I don't know if you have a second to look up gun violence in Canada. I don't know the actual number of killings or gun crimes in Canada. I'd imagine it's fairly low. I'd be curious to hear what it is per capita. But I can give you a little bit of an understanding of the way Canada legally and I guess to some degree culturally looks at, or at least politically is a better word, looks at guns. A couple of days ago, maybe even yesterday, Justin Trudeau came out and he was on some sort of interview, and he said, in Canada, you can't use a gun for self-defense. If you tell, and this is true, if you go to get a gun, and there are hoops you have to jump through to get a gun, and you tell them you want this for self-defense, they will refuse to sell you a gun. They will refuse your license. They'll refuse everything across the board.
Wow.
You cannot do that. In Canada, if you fire a gun outside of particular places or in a way that might endanger someone, including that someone who, if someone's trying to kill you, and you fire your gun in a way that might endanger them, you get prosecuted. So you have no right for self-defense in Canada in that way, at least not with a gun. Or defense of property. You are only allowed to own a gun in Canada for purposes of hunting, sport shooting, or target shooting, which I think is similar to sport shooting, but there's some technicality there.
What if the target is someone?
I'm sure they've fiddled with that. And he also made clear that we don't have that right in our Constitution or in our laws. Now, I haven't really looked into the law part of it. I'm sure there could be an argument made at some level because we have that common law system where everything's built on precedent.
Yeah.
But in the Constitution in Canada, as far as I understand, he's right. There's definitely no Second Amendment. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So to own a gun in Canada, you go and you apply for they have different levels of types of guns. There's unrestricted and restricted, and then there's prohibited. And these different guns fall into these three different categories. It seems to be kind of willy-nilly how they've distributed these. Anything that looks mean is definitely in either prohibited or restricted.
Okay.
And anything that looks nice and sweet, even if it's more powerful or more dangerous than the others, can still be.
Anything made out of wood is like in the...
Yeah.
Wood stock is usually in unrestricted. Long barrel, usually restricted.
Yeah.
Any handgun across the board is in restricted. Anything that looks like you can attach anything to it, like
the rail.
Rails, yeah. Those are all unrestricted. And then certain ones, like if I'm not mistaken, the M1 Garand from World War II, the U.S. service rifle, and certain rifles like that. I have a feeling it has to do with anything related to war. Is on prohibited. Okay. So good luck ever finding that.
Well,
anyway, so what you do is you apply for your unrestricted license. You have to go in for a day of training where they teach you how to safely handle a gun. They show you a nice video that you got to watch where the guy, makes sure to unload his rifle when he's walking. Then he takes his unloaded rifle, and before he jumps over a fence, makes sure it's still unloaded, places it quickly over the fence, slowly goes over the fence, then picks it up, makes sure it's still unloaded, and then continues on his way. That type of thing. The typical health and safety.
Tutorial, Alzheimer's edition.
Yeah, exactly. You're an idiot. Watch this video. You don't kill yourself with your empty gun, please.
Can I watch the video again?
I forgot it.
So anyways, you do that. Then you go to an instructor and they test your knowledge. If you pass the ability to show them how to, load and unload a gun safely, how to hold, how not to point at people. And then I agree with that. It's good to learn to be stupid with a gun. If you pass that, then you have an RCMP, which is our federal police background check. And if that comes back clean, they will issue you your unrestricted license. Now, with that, you can go into a range, and you can shoot without having an instructor there with you, because you have competency, and you can buy unrestricted weapons. The transport and the storage of these weapons is also very important. And if you break any of these rules, you get in a lot of trouble. Transporting, it has to be transported separate from, there have to be 2 degrees of separation between ammunition and weapon. So the weapon has to be locked in something, the ammunition has to be locked in something.
Okay, yep.
Storage is the same. And then that's it. Beyond that,
okay,
it's your gun. Have at it.
It's interesting that, so they only let people have guns for basically 2 reasons: for sport and for hunting, which sport as well. But yeah, for shooting at a range, they could provide the ammunition at the range. Like in Switzerland, that's how we have it. People can't just go around and buy ammunition, at the corner store.
Not at the corner store, but you can buy your own.
You have to have a very specific license, though.
Yes, that is a separate license you get for purchasing ammunition. That's true.
Yeah. So
to be able to keep it in your home, kind of thing.
Just to be able to purchase it.
Yeah. Even though a lot of people have guns here, they don't have ammo for it.
Well, if you did the military, then you have the military issued rounds, but those are not allowed to be used, except on obligatory training and practice. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, you have to. I think now they used to have that you, for the purchasing of ammunition, you had to get this ammunition permit, and it's really just a rubber stamp thing. It's not like, because you already have the guns. So, it used to be every 6 months, but now it's every 3 months, I think. So.
Oh wow.
Like.
That you can buy ammo.
Yeah. So once you get it, then you have it for it's valid for 3 months. So pretty much what people do now is that when they buy big. That's it.
So if it's valid for 3 months, does that mean you can buy as much as you want within 3 months and you're cool?
Yeah.
Or is it when that 3 months is over, all the ammo you've bought is now
legal? No. You can you can purchase for 3 months, and then you have, if you want, on the 4th month, if you want to purchase more, you have to get another license.
Okay, that makes sense.
So you just buy.
You can still stock up pretty well.
You can get your thousands of rounds, and
the Swiss have a tendency of burying ammunition, so.
Okay, nice.
And it becomes a problem sometimes.
I'd imagine some kids digging in a field somewhere.
No, I think what Vincent is referring to is an epic
fail. An
epic fail. Yes. Well, it was a strange thing. Towards the Alps, there's a little town called Mitholz, and there was a military ammunition depot there, and of course it's built into the ground. And this was during World War II that this was made, and there was a little hullabaloo there, and it blew up.
The town kind of blew up as well. Didn't it?
Yeah, a bit of. Fortunately, I don't think there were any there were injuries. No casualties. There were no casualties.
That's good.
That's good. And there's still, I forget the exact amount, but there's still a huge amount of undetonated ammo. Because basically when the depot exploded, all the stuff that didn't explode got shot into the ground, like in every direction. So the stuff's like there's ordinances all over the place. But so they
don't build a house there.
So the government has basically said they put an expert team together to figure out how long it would take to clean the whole area, and they said it was going to take about 10 years. They would have to take 10 years, a decade, to clean the whole area. So they asked the town to decide, do they want to all be evacuated for 10 years? And then have the cleanup happen and then they can come back? Or do they just want to live with it? And they decided just to live with it. They're fine. They're
Brave souls. That's crazy. Wow.
I don't think they have a shooting range there. I don't think that would be smart.
Anyway.
Not a lot of mining going on.
No, but that area, the mountains themselves are shifting massively. And there's like parts of mountains that are coming down and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a pretty cool area.
Yeah.
It's a little ticking bomb.
Wow.
The thing I was referring to before with the CPRC, I found it again. It was an interesting thing that you heard also. Well, actually, the mainstream media didn't talk about it when this mass shooting happened at the school. But so the headline of this CPRC report says mass public shootings keep occurring in gun-free zones. And it says 94% of attacks since 1950. So that was very similar to, I believe, Trump when he was president. He also made this claim that something like, I think he said 98%, because he was referring to a smaller time frame. And he got roasted by fact checkers again because of this this discrepancy of how do you define mass shootings. And the CPRC defines it according to FBI definitions, which removes all those like gang violence and that kind of thing, and it also removes home intruders as well. Because it's like, I understand the argument because it's not the same. Someone going into a home is usually knowing who they're going up against. It's usually, they know who's there. They know whether or not they have guns. And the intent is usually something like robbery or something like that. Whereas when we hear mass shootings, we typically understand it to be someone who basically wants to go into a public place and cause as much death as possible. That's usually, it's about the difference in motive. And these things, because they have a different motive, I think they also have a different solution around them.
Yeah.
And I was just interested about this gun-free zone thing where I mean, basically these mass shootings are happening in places where there, again, what is a gun-free area? The CPRC says a gun-free area is a place where the average citizen is not allowed to open or conceal carry. They're just not allowed to carry. So you have a place where a security guard or a police officer is there, and it's kind of like that person there is the only one who's armed.
Legally.
Yeah. And it's basically they have a huge target on them because someone wanting to assail the place knows, okay, nobody else in this place is armed except for that person. So all I got to do is push that person over, and then I'm scot-free. It's basically shoot here and then there.
To play devil's advocate for a second, because I've been trying to figure this out as like in my own mind, and understand where people are coming from, presuming genuine concern and not ill intent, which I'm sure there's both. But from the genuine concern point of view, I can see where the argument comes in if you are myopically focused on that type of mass shooting where it's some guy goes to a public place to inflict mass casualty.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you were to, let's say, restrict guns completely, like just make them completely illegal for anyone except for police and military, gang crime and criminal guns would still exist, obviously.
True.
They're still going to happen. But if some disgruntled postal worker decided to go walk into a mall, he wouldn't be able to do that. Or it would be much more difficult. And he still would, actually, now that I think about it. But it would be much more difficult because he'd have to get connections in the underworld and all that sort of stuff to get it. So I kind of get it from that perspective. They're like, well, why not make it as difficult as possible? I think that's a fair argument. I don't think it's necessarily an accurate argument, but it's, you could see, like, from a genuine concern position. Okay, I see it. I get it.
Well, often there's usually two arguments in favor of gun ownership, right? There's sort of the reason why the Second Amendment was there, right? So that the people have the control of their own autonomousness, basically, so that the government could never have control like it did in the past over the people. The people would always be able to rise up in a way. That, I think, is a bit of a shaky argument. As time went on, it became more and more shaky. And the second one is, well, the more people that have guns, the more good people that have guns, the less chance bad people with guns have. So I think if you guys want, we could talk about that first one and then go on to the second point. When the Second Amendment was amended, back then technology was very different, right? Ballistics were very different. I believe back then they only had muskets or cannons, but cannons don't fall under the Second Amendment as far as I know.
They do.
I think they do.
Can everyone own a cannon?
According to the Second Amendment, you can own a cannon. Yep.
So.
Yeah, well, people will see you maneuvering that through the mall, so... Pointed at that shopkeep who really pissed you off.
Better aim that one shot well.
Yeah. It's only you don't have semi-automatic cannons, at least not easily. Yeah, so you have that aspect where the technology was vastly different with what people generally had access to, which was a musket or something similar. A mass shooting was not really possible because of the reloading issue. And then when semi-automatics came into more access, then the thing kind of changed. Like, oh, okay, so this isn't just effective in numbers. This is effective as an individual now. And so I think there's also a little bit of there's a change in the function of guns, which at that point, had they known guns would be the way they are now, they might have reconsidered the wording of the Second Amendment at least.
The thing I find funny there is, or strange rather, is at this point when there are so many people clamoring for guns in the United States and in most Western countries to be removed from the hands of citizens, most of those people are simultaneously crying for the very same guns, or in fact bigger and better guns, to be sent to the people of Ukraine. And funnily enough, it's in the same vein of the Second Amendment. So it's like...
That is a fair point, yeah.
There's a counter argument to that particular position as well. The Second Amendment wouldn't allow for these kinds of weapons. And I just quickly pull it up there. There was a gentleman, an inventor in 1777, who invented a rifle that was capable of firing as many as 16 consecutive shots in 20 seconds. And he actually wrote to the Continental Congress to demonstrate his gun for their use. So they were fully aware before or around the time of writing the Constitution and long before the writing of the Second Amendment of the capacity for many shots, even though it wasn't common. So I'm not, there is some argument to be made there. It's not a complete rebuttal by any means. So that's just one aspect too. And I'm sorry. You were saying just now. I kind of missed it as I was looking up. What was it that you responded with as far as?
Oh, I just thought it was. I don't know whether to call it ironic or tone deaf, where a lot of the same people crying for guns to be removed from the hands of citizens in most Western countries, especially in the United States, are the same people crying for those guns and much more dangerous weapons to be put into the hands of essentially citizens in the Ukraine to fight against the tyrannical Russian invasion. So, and if you go back even to the 2013-14 Euromaidan scene that happened in Ukraine as well, the West was fully for the arming of the citizens. And just now in the last, conflict in Ukraine, the West was praising Zelensky for just rolling up and, passing out thousands of weapons to any citizen who wanted to carry one. So I don't understand. If it's good for them, it's not good for Americans. It's not good for the rest of the West. It's like, pick a side. Pick it, like.
It's probably because of the intention behind the weapons and the ownership of them.
You don't know what those people are going to use them for, and in fact...
No, you don't. Which is why the point you're making is a fair one.
Yeah.
But generally, when you look at a citizen in a country that's not directly in jeopardy or in war, it is for defense, or in some cases it's illegal to use it for defense, like in Canada. And there it's only used for hunting and for sports shooting. There's not like an imminent usage of it.
Yeah, but here's the question, right? In Canada, if that wasn't the case, if the law wasn't that way, and if you had the average citizen being allowed to conceal carry or open carry, do you think the police would have done what they did there in the Capitol, in front of the what is it, the Capitol building, the Parliament building, when they came with the mounted with the truckers and stuff? Do you think they would have done that against an armed citizenry? Charge them with mounted police? I don't think so.
I doubt it. And it's an interesting point, because they're obviously, like, nothing is perfect ever. There are pros and cons across the board. So, but this is the problem, is that a lot of these conversations are, how do we make things perfect? And so they start off with a problem to begin with. But one thing also I think a lot of people don't realize is that when people say that criminals will get guns, like in Canada, it's very easy to dismiss that and say, well, yeah, they come over from the United States illegally. So get rid of the guns in the United States, you get rid of the guns in Canada. But even that's not the case, because like what we're probably going to be seeing in Europe coming up pretty soon, all of those guns that just got dumped into Ukraine, especially in a place, this happened in the post-war, post-Cold War era as well, in the former Soviet states. All the weapons, all these sorts of things that were there and did belong to the government got sold off to the highest bidder. Or, individually, some guy needed some money, went, sold 4 or 5 AKs, made a couple $100 and did whatever he needed to do. And you're already seeing that right now, where there are ordnance that has been sent by the United States being sold on black markets in Ukraine or in Europe. And the problem with this is that, let's just say the worst case scenario happens and you end up with now armed gang violence like they have in the United States in cities in Europe. in the UK, in France, and all these places. But you have a citizenry that is incapable of dealing with it because they can't do anything but hide and hope the guy doesn't shoot them and wait for the police to show up. That's where you have that issue, and that's the issue that's kind of at place in the United States. If there were no guns, we could have a completely different conversation. If no one had guns or access to guns, totally different conversation, but that's not reality.
Right.
And Ukraine is not the only time this has happened. The United States dumped $80 million worth of weapons in Afghanistan just at the beginning of the year.
Wow.
That's a lot of weapons. Every time the U.S. military has left a combat zone, it's left a cache of weapons there, pretty much. These things get circulated around the world, and some are caught by police, but again, nobody's perfect and stuff gets through. There is a black market for weapons, whether you like it or not. And as long as governments have weapons and are doing this type of thing, you're not getting rid of criminal weapons.
Yeah. That's another interesting thing about what you said there at the very end about governments having weapons. How, for example, politicians are allowed to have armed bodyguards.
Yeah.
And even some celebrities. I've seen them also having armed bodyguards. I don't know. I mean, if a politician of a country, like in a democratic country, the representative of the people is allowed to walk around with armed guards, I mean, okay, you could say the representative, him or herself, is not armed, but how are they paying for these armed guards? It's with taxes, right?
Yeah.
So if they have that privilege, why is there not a fund for every citizen to basically have their own bodyguard? I mean...
Or you could save money and make every citizen their own bodyguard.
No.
Oh, no. Which brings us back to the whole point of the Second Amendment. And it is argued, don't get me wrong, this is disputed in the legal world in the United States. But the kind of general understanding and generally accepted understanding, I think this is the Supreme Court's understanding of it as well, if I'm not mistaken, is that there is a sort of natural human right to defend one's own life, right? Like, you should have the right to preserve yourself, kind of at the core or the bottom of every single right. Like, without that, what do you really have? And as an extension of that, what does that mean? How far, like, what tools are you allowed to have in order to do this is kind of the question. And I think that kind of, if that question's answered, that kind of closes the door on all the other arguments, because either you can or you can't. Either you have that right or you don't. And then what are the limits?
I guess it also has to take into effect, like, once one agrees that you do have the right to self-preservation of life and limb, not just life. It's like, I don't have any limbs, but I'm alive. Then one also has to probably take into account the probability of one's life or limb being threatened by X, right? Because, yeah, I mean, here in Switzerland, the probability of, for example, an armed mugging, or like being armed with firearm, not with knife, mugging or something like that is so low that
it's generally not even a factor.
Yeah.
If someone is gonna screw with you, they're gonna probably use like a knife or something along those lines.
Yeah. In which case it would be good to have a gun.
Are knife-related muggings common in Switzerland? Like, what are they more common, let's say, than other areas of Europe, or less common? What's
crime rate is very low in Switzerland.
It's
Although I'm sure if you were to zoom into certain areas where there's certain demographics of people,
Geneva
could be higher.
Yeah. Then you would have more concentration. personally, I've only heard of one account of this happening where one of my friends was mugged with a knife.
Okay.
Yeah, but other than that, no. Pretty much.
Yeah, it's very few and far between.
Yeah.
One of the recent things that was brought up to me by my lovely wife, who's, I'm so happy, is back from her long vacay to Australia. Yay! She asked me, "Did you see that video of Matthew McConaughey talking about what happened?" Apparently it's, well, not apparently, according to him, it's the town is he was born there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and apparently he went there and, well, he was called up by the, I don't know, the mayor or the authorities when it happened, and he went and paid a visit. And yeah, Serena asked me if I'd seen the video and seen what he was proposing. I said nope, because I don't generally tune into celebrities and what they have to say. But I do remember Matthew McConaughey having some very interesting conversations with people before, and he seemed to me to be a bit more thoughtful, thought-provoking kind of person. And putting aside the whole celebrity status, he seemed to be very middle of the road kind of guy. And so anyone who wants to can pull up the video. It's him giving I don't know if it was the White House press release, or I don't know what they call it, White House.
It was,
yeah. And
should I play it here?
Yeah, if you can play from the 14th minute on this clip from our most favorite news channel.
We heard from so many people, right?
Fortunately, you can't hear it.
Mothers, fathers,
can they not hear
sisters,
it?
The viewers can, but Arthur can't.
Okay.
Others, Texas Rangers, hunters,
that's
Border
okay.
Patrol, and responsible gun owners who won't give up their Second Amendment right to bear arms. And you know what they all said? We want secure and safe schools, and we want gun laws that won't make it so easy for the bad guys to get these damn guns.
Pause it. So after, about 12 minutes of talking to the press there about a bunch of victims, the stories of a bunch of the victims, he says, that him and his wife talked to so many people, and that included Two Amendment people, so people who, I guess, own their own firearms and so on. And he said what everyone had in common is that they all want safe places. They all want these places to be safe, for the children, of course, and of course for the teachers, not just safe for the children, for everyone. And they all wanted there to be a way to, what does he say at the end there? To stop what kind of people?
So many people, right? Families of the deceased, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, Texas Rangers, hunters, Border Patrol, and responsible gun owners who won't give up their Second Amendment right to bear arms.
Responsible gun owners who won't give up their weapons, their firearms.
We want secure and safe schools, and we want gun laws that won't make it so easy for the bad guys to get these damn guns. We want to find ways to not make it easy for bad guys to get these guns, right? That was the sentiment. And then he goes on, and he basically gives what I thought was a very interesting 4 or 5 points that he thought would help. And interestingly enough, none of those points were take the guns away from the citizenry.
Okay.
So that was kind of like, huh. And I guess because Arthur can't hear this, so we won't play the whole thing. I noted down the points that he brought up. And, okay, so the first point he brought up was background checks. Now, I know that background checks is already a thing. What I've heard, though, is that there is massive room for improvement. in some places the background checks are quite lackluster, and there seems to be a lack of sort of cross-state cooperation. So some people are calling for a federal database, for example, because as far as I understand it, each state has their own records of firearm ownership and, you know, whether or not people have done something stupid in the past and so on. And there's people calling for a federal or a national database. So what do you think about that regarding background checks?
Well, why don't we go through the list of points, and
Okay.
what I think might be interesting is to see if we compare this to the situation with the shooter in this particular instance that has caused
Right. Yeah.
the outrage. Would this have actually stopped it? Because that to me is always the interesting one.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And that's been my thing listening to all the commentators is, okay, how would that have stopped this?
Yeah.
The next point he raised is that the age limit should be raised from 18 to 21. That for me is a bit of a cheap shot, because it's like, well, are there more unhinged 18-year-olds than 21-year-olds? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, why those numbers?
yeah, I don't know. And then the next one was red flag laws. I didn't know what that was, so I had to look it up. It's basically a law that permits anyone from a police officer to a brother, sister, uncle, anyone, to basically petition for someone's guns to be removed based on I don't know, the person having some behavioral problems, or, you know, something like that. It's not something that happens necessarily. It's a petition, and then it goes to a judge, and the judge has to look at the reasons given and so on. And yeah. The next one was firearm waiting period. So this is, I also didn't know what I mean, it seems clear, but I wanted to find out what that was. And it's basically that when someone applies to purchase a firearm, that there is a, say, 2 to 7 day waiting period or something like that, when it's sometimes called a cooling off period.
Right.
It seems kind of short.
Huh?
It seems kind of short.
No, the idea is that when people, and like Arthur said, we can go through these, and maybe we can start with the last one and then go back up. The last one to me seems very sensible, actually, in this case, because this is particularly for people who, you know, fly into a rage or spontaneously just, you know, want to go shoot someone or some people, or, you know, and basically at the moment, without a cooling off period or firearm waiting period, they can just go get the gun, buy the bullets, and go do their shit. Whereas this is kind of like, okay, they can go apply to buy the firearm, and then they have to wait. Like, you know what I mean? Like, sit there twiddling their thumbs like, I'm still so angry. They have to keep that up for that whole period of time, you know? So.
Was that the last one? These are the 4.
I think that was the 4. Those are the 4 that I noted.
Okay. You know what, the funny thing about the waiting period one, I'm not opposed to it. I think that, you know, why not wait? You can wait 4 or 5. Like,
yeah.
The instances in which you will need a gun right now and don't have access to one at all prior to that probably aren't that common. But then at the same time, I think it's equally as uncommon for that to be of any effect on what they think it's going to affect. Right? Like, so for example, if you're the kind of person that flies into a rage to the degree that you're going to buy a gun to go shoot someone, 7 days waiting might stop you from shooting that person that time. But now you have a gun, and it doesn't matter. Like next time, there's no 7 days. This is a one-time pause, right?
Yeah.
And I think that maybe the one downside would be in a situation where you're being threatened, and you never thought you needed a gun before, and now you're really scared, and you go to buy your gun, and you have to wait 7 days, hoping that this person doesn't come bursting through your door. So those would be my probable reasons why I don't know if it would make a difference. In the case of this kid who did this, would it have stopped him? It's hard to say.
Don't know.
It's really hard to say.
He bought the weapons the day before, didn't he?
Anyway, he ordered them online, if I'm not mistaken. So I think he did wait a couple of days to get them.
Wow.
If I might be mistaken on that one.
Okay.
In these types of mass shootings where someone is trying to do as much damage as they can, just they're doing it more for themselves than for anything else. They have like a very deep psychological problem, and 7 days is not going to wait out that problem. It's not like someone who just caught a dude screwing his wife and he wants to just go shoot the bastard. He's probably also got an issue, but it's based on an event. But people that go out and just want to shoot up everyone, it's based off of a long period of time where they've had this building pathological issue. And I don't think 7 days are going to fix that. I think even 3 months, like, it's going to happen at some point when they get a gun. However, for people like this who are so intensely mentally have such an intense mental issue, they would probably be the easiest to detect in a psychological test, which I think should be added more ubiquitously to the background checks, not just to see what you've done, but people should also have to go through a psychological analysis, I think.
That could be one thing that you could do. Let's say you did do some sort of a waiting period in general, but if you could provide, now this obviously leaves open room for what's the word, abuse of this particular loophole. But if you did leave open opportunity where if you could provide credible evidence of immediate threat, then you could like a police statement or a that kind of thing, then you could get your gun immediately, which would, there are ways. It's not a terrible idea. Though again, it doesn't change the fact once the gun is in that person's hand, the gun is in that person's hand.
I think it sounds to me it sounds highly unlikely that that the government would be in favor of something like that. Like you walking up to a police station, hey, can I buy a gun? This is who I would like to use it on if I get into trouble with them.
No, it wouldn't be a case of going to the police station because you go to the store to buy it, right? It would be more of a case where I have to make you wait 7 days before I can give you the weapon you just bought, unless you can bring me a police statement or something of that caliber showing that you have a credible reason why you need it sooner than 7 days. For whatever reason.
It would have to be like there's someone stalking you, and the police would basically have to verify that that's the case.
But if the police could verify that that's the case, then the police should take care of it.
That's the thing. A lot of the time they can't.
Invest in mental health.
So what they'll say. Sorry, go.
Sorry.
Yeah. So what? If you go to the police and you report, my ex is stalking me or something, and the ex is known to be, possibly armed, and the police can't really do anything about it, and police resources aren't necessarily going to be keeping tabs on this person or, posting a car. It's not a movie, so they're not going to be like sitting outside in the cop car, for days, So
well,
in
at least
that
a
case,
restraining order.
Right.
That seems like the minimum you could do.
Right.
And if the person violates the restraining order, then you can put more on.
But I would view it as a credible threat if there was someone who was potentially armed, who was basically acting maliciously towards me.
I was just gonna say, or let's say you're getting social media threats, or you're getting text message threats or phone calls to your, your number.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, any kind of verifiable threat, the police could say, they wouldn't say, yes, this person should have a firearm, but they would say, yes, the threat is legitimate.
Couldn't you fake that with relative ease?
Well,
if you're getting death threats?
Yes.
You could. The thing is, that's why I said it's something that's open to abuse for sure. Though filing a fake police report is a felony as well, so you risk a lot. If you're a criminal already, then it doesn't.
At that point, you might as well just go into the black market and buy yourself a gun. Like, what do you?
So it would be more for, again, these things would be restricting the law, but the point of this one, at least from my understanding, was keeping someone who's in a rage, just a regular person in a rage, going and buying a gun and doing something stupid.
Yeah,
sure.
So that if you want to make that compromise on that particular issue, yes. Though, to what you were saying earlier with police resources, I think that, without getting too much into it, I think that might be a better angle for people to be approaching these sorts of things with, even though I already have a rebuttal to that. But the reason why I say that is because the FBI has been aware of every single one of these shooters. Every single one of these mass shooters. They've been in contact with them. They've had them under observation. They've, all of that prior to the shooting. And yet somehow these shootings still occur. Is that a lack of resources? Is that a lack of action? Why is that happening? Secondly, when someone flies into a rage enough times to where that might be an issue, or to such a degree where they would actually consider, because I think the only time someone would be so angry that they consider doing something that stupid or dangerous or evil would be in a case where they are really screwed over for some reason, which does happen, right? Like your wife sleeps with someone else, or like something like that. And even then, I don't think most people will go that way. So I don't know. I think there may be better ways to prevent school shootings and mass shootings, which is the point, right? It's not necessarily to prevent Joe from doing something stupid down the street, than having a waiting period, if that makes sense. Because all that's going to cost money too, right? All this processing and paperwork. So maybe that money better used somewhere else.
Be safe for schools.
What about? I remembered the fifth point that he brought up.
Okay.
Stop the sensationalist media reporting. That I thought was really a killer point, because he's there at the White House presser, and he's talking to the press, and he says to them, "Stop the sensationalist media reporting."
Yeah.
Because that's something that you hear a lot about these shooters, is that they want renown. They want their face everywhere. They want their name everywhere. And the mainstream media does that. So
I think that would go further to stop this sort of stuff than probably anything else on the list.
To basically like eliminate like almost their existence, just sort of like, we won't show their faces, we won't say their names. It happened. We'll say perpetrator. That's it.
Yeah.
Do you know the name of the Uvalde shooter? Do you know the name of the Uvalde shooter?
It was
right off the top of my head. No.
Did you ever see it anywhere?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't see it. And his face, I believe I saw his face a couple times, but I didn't think it was being sensationalized, like that, those details.
Well, hopefully not. I still think it is. That the sensationalism, rather than just being making this person infamous, because I don't think that's the entirety of it. I do think that might play into certain types of people, certain like serial killer types who want the infamy. But I think with sensationalism, the big problem is the sensationalism ties directly into the politics of it. Right? It's a big deal But you can tell with media reporting that their big deals really do align with particular political policies that they want pushed, or that they, let's say, support at the very least.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the biggest effect that would be had on it, is it would stop a lot of the shaping of public opinion towards particular political policies.
Mm.
Yeah, just leave it at that.
Okay.
So you'd need legislation to basically say you can't report on shootings like that, or you have to omit these details.
The difficulty is you can't, right? You actually can't legislate. I mean, I guess you can to some degree, but it's very difficult to legislate media, especially in the United States.
Yeah.
With First Amendment protections, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to essentially convince them to control their urges, and that's very difficult, especially if it's in someone's best, or someone's political best interest to push this through.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty, because what most of these, in fact, you can go to almost every single major issue that's been talked about, probably for forever, but at least for the last few years, and you'll note that the majority of it is something happens, media everywhere has a massive blitz on pushing a particular emotionality, and then their particular ideas of what will fix this, usually very little, or very ineffective ideas. And then politicians who either already agree or who want to look like they're doing something, then just adopt that story or that concept and write some kind of legislation around it and push it through. And honestly, like, think about anything. COVID is another example of this, right? Why lockdowns? I don't know. China did it. Let's do something. I mean, there could be all sorts of other reasons, but there's a lot of that in there as well. So the sensationalizing, I don't know how you fix that, but that would go.
I think it would just have to become societally frowned upon. Like, people would actually have to start, for example, in social media, they would just have to say, hey, shame on you, Washington Post, for saying the person's name or using their photo. You shouldn't be doing that. And if there's enough, sort of public pressure put on, then I think that would make a difference. I saw, for example, Tim Pool and Louder with Crowder. They refuse to say the name or show any imagery of the perp. And absolutely, I applaud that. So, and I think that should be taken on.
Yeah,
but
I think it's good.
What do you think about the red flag law thing? The ability of people to essentially, like, if I saw you acting strangely, I guess the idea is that I could go and file whatever the heck this is, and say this person is acting strangely. I think their firearms should be removed from them. I just see a huge bureaucratic nightmare.
That, and it is so easy to abuse.
Yeah,
because especially if you could do it anonymously.
Like, I don't think you could
I
want
to shoot that guy, but I know he's got a big ass shotgun in his bedstand, so I'll just trump up something I know he did.
I don't think you could do it anonymously. So
right, and
leaving
if you
that
can't
aside,
do it anonymously, then you have two people taking each other's guns away because the guy is going to fire back bureaucratically.
Presuming that you even are aware of the person who did that, it could be filed where it's kept secret.
Right. If it's anonymous, then you can just
Well, anonymous from who? Anonymous from the government or from the person you're trying to take the guns from?
From the guy you're trying to take the guns from.
Yeah, that probably.
So you have a ghost taking your gun, or you have two people knowing, like, oh, you tried to take my gun. All right, I'll take yours then.
I'll just bring my tank.
Yeah.
Also, consider there's a popular, or something that became popular, which is insane, called swatting that happens in the United States.
That's crazy.
If that can be abused in that way,
shit,
I can't even imagine what people would do in this. And then take, for example, the fact that so many people don't like particular political pundits, or you find out your neighbor's a Trump supporter, and so now you file red flag laws just because he has a Trump flag outside of his house.
There you go.
And yeah, a bureaucratic nightmare is going to be huge. Courts will be, they're already overloaded, so now they're flooded with trumped up reports, or whatever. I don't know. It's I don't know. I guess the question would be, I mean, and then it can even get worse where, okay, now the government just decides to label anyone who has a particular political opinion or particular religious opinion or particular unpopular social opinion as falling under these red flag laws, in the way that they put people on no-fly lists or terrorist watch lists for no particularly good reason. Like, the way that they've abused the powers they already have should make anybody very, very, very loath to give them any more powers to abuse. But I guess on the flip side, what would be the benefit of that? You'd hopefully catch someone with mental illness before they could own a gun.
Yeah.
Well, this is for, I mean, as far as I understood, it's specifically for removing firearms from people
who already have them.
Yeah.
So in the case of the shooting, how would they, like, the FBI were already watching him. Would this be a case where they could then take his weapons?
Yeah, I guess.
But like you said, for the resources and like the administrative and bureaucratic cost, I don't see that being viable at all.
The thing is, there would have to be some kind of almost like a penalty for it not going through. So essentially, there would have to be, for example, some kind of financial, I don't know, slap if it didn't, if it's
some
you said, where you
if the evidence didn't match the accusation, essentially, because what you're doing is you're accusing someone of something, and if the evidence doesn't come through to support your accusation, then there should be some kind of penalty.
That could also deter people from doing it then.
That's the idea.
Well, also from doing it justly.
Legitimately, yeah.
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 But you would think that if someone, like, that's the whole thing, right? If I thought that you were, I don't know.
I mean, you could just think, man, that guy's really unhinged, or he scares the shit out of me. And I live right next to him. I don't want him to have that gun.
Yeah.
Or you saw him walking on his porch, just like pointing his gun around.
Yeah.
Like, the police come over to his place. Okay, yeah, he's got a gun. We have no proof of him doing any of that stuff, and they bugger off again.
Yeah.
Your neighbor's gonna start looking at you different. And you got a fine.
I think there are laws, though. It would be really interesting to hear from a law enforcement professional the limits of what they're able to do in these kinds of situations, because I think if you're waving your gun around your porch in your neighborhood and your neighbors are concerned and they call the cops, I think there are things they can do to de-escalate the situation, or to take the gun for a certain amount of time, or to take you for a certain amount of time, or whatever it is, to make sure that the neighbors aren't under threat. I'm pretty sure that those powers already exist. But I'm really more curious, what could the FBI have done, and why didn't, like, I'm not trying to point fingers at all. I'm just really curious. Like, okay, let's just say you do have a kid that's or a potential shooter that you're watching, who is buying weapons, who is stockpiling ammo, who's moving towards potentially committing something. You're watching for a reason. What can you do prior to the attack? Like, what are your actual options? I'd be really interested to find out what that is.
I guess the idea would be, if there was a red flag law, then the FBI could have used it to pull the weapons away from him. Although I would question, without a red flag law, could they really not do anything?
Right. And then with a red flag law, let's say they did that, they pulled his weapons. On what char? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
it has to be verifiable. Otherwise, they could just take the weapons from anyone.
Right, exactly. And then the thing is that, okay, so let's say they do take his weapons, and he goes to court and gets them back, because there's no foundation for actually taking his weapons. or maybe there is with him writing things about shooting a school. I don't know. I'd be really interested to find out what the reality is there.
Or he would have to go, like what you were saying, he would have to go sit for a, what's it called?
A psych evaluation.
Yeah, psych evaluation.
That could be a thing. It'd be interesting to see the details. What exactly is being proposed when someone says red flag laws?
Yeah.
And how does that protect the average person, or hey, even the person who is concerned about their government from being, disarmed, but also protect schools particularly. And that's I think my big issue is, what does this do for the school?
Yeah.
And for those kids at school.
To me, the red flag law is more of a red flag than the firearm waiting period, for example. To me, the firearm waiting is I'm pretty okay with that compared to the red flag laws.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't think the FBI can really do that much. I mean, if you want the FBI to be more proactive when they have someone under watch, you're also under the assumption that the FBI should be more proactive in monitoring people in general.
They do.
Which, yeah, but it's not, especially as someone who loves their autonomousness and their freedom, you generally don't want the government to want to watch you more.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of an issue there.
Yeah.
And also, just logistically, I'm guessing that when the FBI said we had him under watch, what the significance of that is, I'm not sure, because they probably have a bunch of people under watch on a list. I'm probably on their list, for all I know.
This makes an interesting point, though, because again, it goes back to resources. Do they need more resources on the one hand? But then on the other hand, are resources being wasted watching political opponents or people with particular political views that should be used on actual potential criminals, shooters, that kind of thing?
People who tweeted the wrong thing.
I'm sure a lot of people are on these lists that have no business being on the list. They're just disgruntled about something, or they're,
like James O'Keefe.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Like, why is he on a watch list? No idea.
Why was his house raided?
Exactly,
by the FBI. So, whatever.
I'm guessing they have a lot of people on their list that would fit a similar profile to the guy that actually did this. And in 99% of the cases, they end up doing nothing. So they kind of have to, like, they can't know which of them is going to go actually do something. And they probably don't have the resources to monitor them all equally.
And maybe not even the legal, standing.
Right.
That's what I wonder, if there's a legal standing for it. The funny thing for me, though, is that I believe with that particular shooter, and then with several prior, in the weeks prior, including, if I'm not mistaken, the Buffalo one, they had contact with these shooters. The FBI did. They had agents who had contact with these shooters. And I don't mean contact as in, I don't know what that means actually, but apparently they were agents
conversing,
both conversing and within, I guess, if you take the vicinity and the life of this person, there were agents involved in different aspects of it. So I don't know if they were trying to set up what do you call it? There was a movie called it with Sean Connery, Entrapment, actually just
to bait them, and then
right, and then it went out of hand, or what, or if they just were too slow. Again, I don't know. It would be very interesting to find out, because I think with the level of interest in these things now, every bit of information should be explored.
Absolutely.
To do the best to stop these things.
Okay, but if we raise the age to 21, that will solve everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Solve drinking.
It did, didn't it? I don't know. Raise age to 21, that seems so arbitrary to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see that having much of an effect. Yeah. I'd like to raise the question, though, of, well, one of the major motivations to keeping the Second Amendment is, well, self-defense, right? So then that kind of plays in comparison to, okay, so if someone can buy a gun legally, how much does that save lives in comparison to costing lives? Like,
Ooh,
how
yeah.
many legally obtained firearms kill people as opposed to saving people?
I can tell you that. In the US, the vast majority of firearm usage is saving lives.
Is it from citizens or is it from law enforcement?
Citizens. And no, altogether, but even if you just take the citizens.
Okay, but if you just take citizens,
yeah,
then
the vast majority is saving lives. It's
Is it,
something like... Sorry. Go on.
No, sorry. I was going to say, in fact, some of what are considered mass shootings are actually citizens defending themselves from 4 assailants or 3 or more assailants. Which does happen.
That is okay. That's interesting. I suppose,
I don't have the stats here, but I've seen that stat quoted quite a bit, where it's something like 3 million or so users of firearms in 1 year are protecting life, and there's like 10 or 20,000 that are in the other direction. So it's like, it's just in a completely different universe.
Yeah. So in the case of Uvalde, why did that one go so horribly wrong?
Because it was a gun-free zone. Maybe.
I thought there was a thing where they were arming teachers.
No. Okay, so this is the next thing I wanted to ask. Okay, so we kind of talked about raise the age to 21. I think we all just sort of like, background checks, I think we acknowledge they can be improved. I think there's room for improvement there. Psychoanalysis, that kind of thing, right? I mean, I don't know. This kid was not in a good way, right? He didn't have a father in the house. He was not in a relationshiply with his family and so on. I mean, the first person he went and shot was his grandmother, right?
Yeah.
Before he went to the school. I was shocked to hear that. I was like, oh. I think she survived though, as far as I recall. But tough old bird. But he was obviously not savvy, and I would deduce that if he went to any shrink worth their salt, that the shrink, I think, would have been able to pick out, hey, like, this kid should not be having firearms. I don't know.
Hopefully, yeah. There's something really quickly that I wanted to touch on before we hop into that next thing about arming teachers, because what you said here about the shooting, what went wrong there, and this is something I find so interesting as far as the response. The police are under fire right now from the citizens because this has happened several times actually. They did nothing. They stood there in a perimeter while children were being shot inside, and that was it.
Yeah.
I don't know the reasons. I don't know. Like, again, I can't really make a particular judgment call. To me, it seems very odd that someone would do that.
I heard of that there was like some kind of a misunderstanding in the police there. Like, the guy in charge didn't know he was. And then apparently he's like, screw this, I'm going in. But then he took off his radio because he knew that he couldn't run properly with it. So he just left it and ran in without communication. And then, like, his whole squad had no contact with him. And they're like, okay, the guy in charge just fucked off.
So regardless, whether it was incompetence, and in that case, extreme incompetence.
Yeah.
Or something else, the police were absolutely useless.
Yeah.
In the case.
Not only useless, but they kept the armed parents out.
Yeah.
So not only were they useless, but they actually stopped brave parents from saving their children's lives. So
some could say that they were, what do they call it when you help someone do murder?
Accomplice
to the murder.
They were accomplices, maybe unknown, but whatever, they were accomplices. The point is, then the entire argument became, take guns away, only police should have guns.
Yeah.
And I know this is kind of a tired trope because it's been pointed out how stupid it is over and over and over again. But to me, I just find it very odd that was the response to that, because this is one of several times where police didn't answer. There's another 2 instances. In fact, one of the big ones, the Parkland shooting, I think it was.
Okay.
Several years ago. That sheriff's department had 2 shootings in their department, and both times did the same thing. And they were really under fire for that reason. And I know from a legal standpoint, as I believe it's the same in Canada, it's definitely the case in the United States, and I wonder if it's the case in Europe as well. Police don't have a legal duty to protect anybody. They don't. Their legal duty is to enforce the law. So they can arrest or shoot that guy who is breaking the law, but their job is not to protect those kids or you as a person, which to me almost kind of stamps the Second Amendment argument of self-preservation and self-defense even more. Like it's that ends the argument almost, because what other options do you have?
I read as well that police officers who had children in the school, they went in insofar as they could make sure that their children were safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then stopped parents who were armed from saving their children who were being shot at. I mean, and then apparently there was 1 or 2 parents who were just like, fuck this, and went in anyway.
Yeah. And 1 Border Patrol officer, who I think was the one who actually stopped the shooter.
Well, I think that was the guy in charge.
Oh, the Border Patrol guy was in charge. That shouldn't.
Don't quote me on that, but from what I saw in the news report, it was literally just 1 dude that went like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And the one security or police officer who was stationed at the school, who was the first one on the scene, apparently, he just backed off. Like, I'm not going to do anything until the rest come.
So what do you feel about having teachers being armed then? Because 1 teacher was shot and killed, right?
Yeah.
A woman. If all the teachers had issued firearms, which some may or may not want, this could have gone very different.
The thing is also that, like I heard someone talk about how the schools in the United States are actually, like how they're constructed, where you, like here in Switzerland, you can basically just walk into the school and there's multiple doors and it's just open. There's, whereas there apparently you have like an outside door, an inside door, and then there's always an administration counter, and you have to go past the administration counter, and people are there, and there's administrators and so on. So in this case, even if the teachers weren't armed, but if there was just a weapon in the administration office, that would have already, you know what I mean? Like, you don't even have to arm all the teachers, but it's just...
Yeah. I think one thing that's concerning is that anytime you have government implemented or forced anything, it can become, because it's so broad and sweeping usually, it just automatically causes issues. There are definitely teachers who probably shouldn't have guns. There are probably some teachers who would be perfectly wonderful if they were armed. So that it gets really tricky to be like, no, you all have to be armed.
Yeah.
I think there might be a way to create a legislation in which, if a teacher wanted to be armed at school, they could then have, you have your regular psych exams and you have your marksmanship training and all these sorts of things, and the same way that you'd probably have CPR training and that sort of stuff if you're a teacher. And you could file as a sort of federal agent, particular to that role, right? So now you're deputized as someone who has willingly stepped up to defend a school. I have a feeling that if you did something like, and maybe that's excessive and you don't need to go that far, I don't know, but I just have a feeling that that would allow the kind of people who do feel the duty to step up and do it and who feel like they're capable of it to take that responsibility without being like, okay, everybody, now you have to go get trained and you have to carry this gun around and all that sort of stuff. But to your point too, the administration office, that would be a great place to have a couple of armed teachers, or hey, a couple of armed security officers who again have that same sort of seriousness to them, not just like, hey, I work for minimum wage at a security company, and there's no way while I'm running in front of a bullet for $15 an hour. Not going to happen. But actual, like, these guys are deputized. These are serious people.
The reason I would prefer putting having an armed teacher, for example, or even an armed administrator over an armed security guard or police is that generally teachers and so on are people who have kind of because they're why are they teachers? Because they have this thing for the children, right? So they have that kind of, they want to protect them. They're there to teach them and educate them and care for them. Whereas the officer thing, I think that to me is sort of like, it's
a job.
Exactly. They turn up, they clock in, clock out. Whereas the teachers, and then again, especially like the teachers in the school with the children, it's within the teacher's best interest to pull that weapon out and use it. Like, so I would definitely not be for something that's like, everyone who works in a school must be armed. Absolutely not.
Yeah. That could also put a target on the teacher's back if the teachers were all armed.
Yeah.
It could be a case too, though, where, let's say they have a gun safe somewhere in the classroom that the teacher's aware of, but it's, it's obviously locked. The teacher's the only one with the code, that kind of thing. So there's no chance of any foul play sort of thing. But because already I know that they have, and they do this here in Canada too, even though we don't have that same issue, where they already have drills with the kids regularly for if there's an emergency, they call it, but they're active shooter drills.
Okay.
They already have, most of them have metal mesh on the outside windows. They have that same setup where you have dual doorways. You could start setting things up in such a way where maybe there was there are so many things you could do. You could set up, maybe there's a third door before you start heading into the classrooms, which can be locked from the administration office. There's a handgun or a gun in a lockbox in the classrooms for teachers who have gone through that training and wanted to do that, because I know that with their drills they can lock the doors. They've been taught to lock the doors. The kids have been taught to go under desks or go hide in certain corners or that sort of thing. And then the teacher could be taught, okay, this is your actual range of fire that you want to have. This is your, these are your vectors. This is how you want to approach if someone's coming through that door. These are the things, you can have that kind of training so the teachers would know what to do. Because I agree with you in that regard, where the teachers, to at least some degree, care for that group of kids in their room. Some more
than
others.
Themselves as well.
To some degree. Yeah, and so that really is the last line of defense. You can do all sorts of things and make it, because this is also how the Secret Service work and any sort of protective security detail. There are layers of protection.
Yeah.
When you're actually at the president, you've gone through so many layers of protection that should have stopped you long ago. Yeah. And so something similar to that, creating that sort of, and there are so many experts in the United States that could set something like this up for schools.
Right. Yeah.
I just don't see any reason why they haven't.
Yeah. I would be for it. I would be for having, the ability for a teacher or three in a school to carry. I would be absolutely for that. They would be well trained and they would have a dog in the fight. They would, really have a vested interest in keeping the place safe. So, and to me, that is something that wouldn't cost a lot either. Like it's
low cost program. And it would probably be more effective than almost any of these things that are being discussed, and at a much lower cost. These are expensive.
Except the age limit. That's a winner. the age.
Except for that one. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you would probably stop some people,
for 3 years.
Yeah. Well, that was their waiting period.
That was their
yeah, exactly. No, and I think the other thing too is, okay, so imagine if you stop sensationalizing, you actually set up these layers of defensive perimeters to some degree, right? I don't mean fences and snipers, but like to some degree. You made it very clear that anyone attacking a school is going to be bogged down very heavily by the people within the school and the infrastructure within the school, at least long enough for police to arrive. Then you make it clear the police need to actually do something when they arrive. Those things would go far. And then I think if you also made it so that obviously these things have severe punishments for people who get caught doing them, but a lot of what we consider mass shootings, a lot of these gang shootings, a lot of these sorts of the other gun violence that is aggressive gun violence, not defensive. The actual punishments for these things and for violent crimes and stuff are very, very low, like very small. And recently, especially after the 2020 riots and the whole Black Lives Matter movement and everything, they put in a bunch of district attorneys who I don't know what the reasoning was. I think it was a Black Lives Matter platform proposal. Basically, it was like, no, just don't prosecute it at all.
Wow.
Or if you prosecute it, like slap on the wrist sentences. Like there were there's a story of two girls, they must have been 18 or 19 or something like that, or 20, like very young, who got in an Uber and killed their Uber driver. Like they just killed their Uber driver. Both of them saw 0 prison for killing someone.
Were they 18 and over, or were they adults?
They were 18 and over, if I'm not mistaken. In New York was one of the places where they had that kind of DA. There's another DA that just got removed in California for similar things. Like it was violent crimes just going unpunished. People who would go and assault someone or something horrible, and they'd be out the next day in the street and this sort of stuff. So that to me is a much bigger issue to tackle than to be worried about Joe getting angry, potentially going and buying a gun, making sure he's 21 and he's filled out his psych evaluation. And then like, those are good. Don't get me wrong. They might even be the best thing ever, but not until we've actually addressed some of these things that are really causing problems.
That's another thing that I like. Whenever there's this call for government to solve the problem, a lot of the times how it seems to me is that the underlying cause of problem X is so complex so complex that basically all we want to do is bash the thing over the head with a club. And then we go to the government and we say, hey, government, you're the biggest, baddest club around. Would you please whack this thing over the head for me? And that's it. It's not sophisticated. It's not fine-tuned. It's not civilized a lot of the times. It's just dumb and brutish. So that's why I don't like a lot of, even other things. To me, a lot of these things to me seem to be caused by certain, let's say, sicknesses in society. A lot of things that are underlyingly cancerous, just, rotten. And we don't want to talk about those things because, well, why, right? We don't want to talk about the problem with fatherlessness and families breaking up and where's that whole culture coming from and all that kind of stuff. Why is it that in Switzerland, even though there are that many guns around, why don't we have people just waltzing into the schools here and shooting them up? I mean, they could. They have the weapons and the rounds and everything. There's cultural differences, there's societal differences, and that's what I don't really hear people in the US talking about. Or the people who want to get the guns away from the citizens. I don't hear them talking about it either.
It's a tricky conversation for sure, because it's one of those things where it's difficult for the government to say, here, I have a solution. I'm going to slap this Band-Aid. Here's my legislation. Get me reelected. And it really does come down in a lot of cases to the fact that most politicians spend the majority of their time campaigning to get reelected. They spend very little time actually creating or looking through or debating legislation. So that's a big problem right there. But the other thing too is that this is the thing that I think Europeans don't realize, may begin to realize sooner rather than later. I don't know. There are people who, for maybe many reasons, maybe few, I'm not sure, do not consider life precious the same way that many in, let's say, Canada, or even in the United States or in Europe or whatever it is, see it. Within certain really heavy, and I don't mean everyone across the board in these areas, but within certain certain gangs or certain of those types of environments, there's this very uncaring, or even like just inability to notice the harm caused by action. And you see this in stories of, like, there was a story recently of a 17-year-old who, in that exact county where the DA was just removed in California, this is actually the reason they were removed, had been brought in for some crime which left a girl in the hospital, was let out the next day by the DA uncharged, didn't charge him, stole a car, ran down a one-way street, not on drugs, not drunk, completely sober, stared a mother and child in the face, and ran them over, like ran them down. Then was again arrested for this and released the next day by the same DA. Kid was 17 years old. Unremorseful, like absolutely unremorseful. Didn't care, couldn't care less. And there are other instances like this. In New York, there was one the other day. Two guys wanted to mug someone, punched him. He fell down, cracked his skull on the cement, died. They just robbed his dead body, walked away. Couldn't care less. They just killed someone. So what a lot of people don't realize is when you have people like that, for whatever reason, I have no idea why these people are that way, or that those particular people are that way. I don't know. Could be a number of reasons. But when you have people like that, the issue is no longer the weapon being used, because obviously they will use whatever weapon. The issue is, how do you keep people like that off the street, or make sure people don't end up like that? Whatever you want to approach it, all the more power to you.
Yeah.
But how do you stop that? And if you have large enough numbers of those people in the United States, I think if it's not the if it's not the third largest population, it's close to it. You have a large enough population, and a weak enough culture of taboos, you might end up in that same situation, if that makes sense. See, one thing about Switzerland, for example, and even Canada, and a lot of places like this, there's still a very strong, I guess, there's a way things are done. I think Switzerland's probably a better example of this. Things are done a certain way, and they don't really like it if you do things outside of that particular way. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the impression I got. And while some people might see that as stifling their personal freedom, or it's stuffy and old and it needs to be removed because it's a relic of the past, those same things actually tend to hold off divorce, unwed marriage, things like that seem innocuous, but then when you follow the results of those same things down the road, you end up where the United States is right now, where they've thrown out every taboo. Everything's okay. And then they go, oh my God, why is it going this way? It's like, you can actually connect some of these dots. That's a funny
thing that I notice with a lot of people who come to Switzerland. They look at the country and they say, oh, it's such an amazing place. It's so clean. It's so neat. There's so little crime. Everyone's dressed well. There's not a bunch of beggars sitting around asking for money. There's, they talk about all these things, these nice things about Switzerland. But then they say as well, yeah, but it's also, they have so many rules, and the social norms are so, fiercely kept and all this kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, well, that kind of goes together. That it's not like you don't just naturally have a well-running, efficient, clean, crime-free society. You know, I mean, what are you comparing it with? Oh, when I was in Madrid, it was like this, da 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 da. And it's like, yeah, I mean, sorry, like,
yeah. Well, and it's the reason why if you took a number of Swiss people and transplanted them to a desert island, not desert island, but like, you know, an uninhabited place.
yes,
they would recreate Switzerland.
exactly.
And this has been seen everywhere in the world throughout history. The culture really does affect the place and the outcome.
Yeah.
Well, it depends which ones you take.
This is
really
true.
depends which ones you take. Because you were saying before about like let me try and remember what you said. Was it? I think it was you that said that.
I said nothing.
Like leftist people that are outside of Switzerland, they look at Switzerland, they think like, oh wow, you know, look at all these amazing things you have going in there. Yeah. And it's true. Like the things we have going for us is, in comparison to other places in the world, utopic. It's like, holy shit, you guys actually got that running.
Yeah.
But then if you look inside of Switzerland, like you have a very vocal mass of people in Switzerland that say we need to be so much more progressive.
Yeah.
Like what we have here, it's dark ages. It's terrible. And I feel like if these people would just take a little look behind the curtain and watch the rest of the world burn, they would be like, oh, you know, it's actually not that bad.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I can't remember who it was that said it. It might have been Thomas Sowell, but he was saying you have to ask people with these wonderful progressive ideas compared to what?
Yes.
Like, oh, we're so archaic. Compared to what?
Yeah.
It's funny because you ask leftists in America or in Canada and you're like, okay, they're like, oh, our society is so far from where it should be. You know, it could be so much better. And you're like, oh, where's better? They will never tell you India,
Sweden,
or Somalia. Or they will tell you, they'll tell you Northern Europe somewhere. And then the Northern Europeans, I don't know who you guys point to. Like, I just really don't know because I don't know where else there is to go.
But they'll point to very specific things about specific places they like. But of course, if you take it en masse, it'll be just like, oh my god, this is terrible.
Well, they just point to Scandinavia because they heard that they're all socialist and have free healthcare.
Scandalous.
There you go. There you go. And that's the funny thing. It's like, compared to what? And then the other thing that I've realized that a lot of people today don't recognize. And I think you only really start to recognize it when you have to actually try to build something yourself. And maybe this is why, because I didn't recognize it before either, is how difficult it is to actually create an institution, much less a long-lasting, much less actually fairly good and well-functioning institution, much less a society built on many of these. Like it's tough.
Yeah.
It's not easy
and
at all.
And it's much easier to tear it down. It's super easy to do that. Yeah.
And all the people with these new, great, wonderful ideas, often they're people who've never done anything. They have no idea what the consequences are. They just want to have some, punch themselves a little bit more personal space or whatever it is within this thing. And I understand the reasoning behind it. But I think it's like they're tearing down fences and they have no idea what it took to put those there or why they're even there in the first place.
And their so-called progress is only possible off the back of the so-called archaic, old-fashioned stuff.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
Yeah. Well, this has been very educational.
I do have one more question. Yeah. All right. About the types of guns. You were talking before about the different categories, like regular, restricted, and then like
prohibited.
Yeah. The guns that are accessible to people. Could they be more restricted down to, at least just for regular people, maybe people that specifically want a gun for hunting or for sports shooting, they would have a different gun than, say, someone who wants it for self-defense? Like, shotguns don't work so well when you're trying to hunt a deer, I guess they have buckshot, but you're you're not gonna have a deer anymore at the end of that. But they don't work so well for violent crime or mass shootings.
Oh, you mean as the perp?
Yeah.
Oh.
You don't hear about shotguns being used so much in that respect.
Yeah.
So could the
Yeah.
types of guns be limited more down to guns that are less capable of this? Like they were talking about banning the use of bump stocks, which I think is really freaking stupid. When do they ever use a bump stock? And extended magazines.
For our viewers, explain what a bump stock is.
Bump stock is basically a way to cheat around a rifle being semi-automatic. So you use the recoil of the gun to basically let off another shot, which has another recoil, so you can basically get a really high fire rate off of that. It's very janky, as one thing, and it's very, very difficult to be accurate at all. Like, just shooting anything full auto is hard to be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Now put it on something that's like rattling around. Yeah. The whole gun is moving back and forth. That's what makes it work.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, good luck aiming that. I've never heard of that ever being used in any mass shooting. It seems like a really bad idea.
I think it was used once in a mass shooting that was then used as a reason to ban bump stocks. So take from that what you will.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the reason of that, but that's the only one I heard of.
Okay.
As far as I know, in the United States, they're banned. I might be wrong, but
And since then, there's been no more mass shootings, obviously.
Well, they're still allowed in the U.S., I believe.
Yeah.
But there were
I don't know
no more mass shootings with bump stocks.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, with as far as I understand, yeah, once they were banned, they disappeared. But your question is, would it maybe be effective to limit these weapons, like to make it so that, let's say you have a shotgun that only holds 3 rounds, or you have even if you have an assault rifle style rifle, it holds 5 or something like that, as opposed to 30.
Yeah.
What's an assault rifle as opposed to just a rifle?
It's semi-automatic.
They're all semi-automatic.
Most of the time when people talk about assault, it looks a certain way.
Oh, but that's stupid.
Assault pistol.
It's not an actual term. Like, it's a term from gaming and from
It really is. It really is. Which is great, because a lot of these people that was it the mayor or someone came out and he's like, it's games. Like, we have to stop these violent games.
Yeah.
And they're assault rifles.
It's tough to say. It honestly is tough to say.
Well, at the core of the question is, do you think people should be able to own a tank? Right?
Right.
That's
right.
Like, let's just ask the question.
Right. And the reason why you generally can't is
why
do you need it, and the amount of damage you can make.
In the United States, you can own a tank.
Yeah.
People do own tanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so the why do you need it is out the window. It's out the freaking window.
No, if you're starting from the first principle, let's make it a first principle, that the reason you have the right to bear arms is in case your government goes apeshit.
Yeah, then you need a tank.
Then you need a tank and maybe a couple F-18s.
Parked out.
Yeah.
Parked out
the driveway.
So then it's like, to me, the question is moot. You should be able to have whatever weapons the government has, basically.
In that
then
case,
you could have people literally
For
just
that
like
reason.
blowing up government buildings, just like mortar striking the White House. You wouldn't have the White House anymore.
If a tyrannical government arises and there's martial law and all that shit, I mean,
yeah.
but it'll never happen.
Because imagine if Swiss people had access to pretty much all weaponry at any time. Like, let's say your military was, rather than a government military, it was city militia or city run or state run or canton run military. And so whatever your canton decided on, that's what you wanted. And the people basically had full control of that government.
Mm-hmm.
Then in that case, as a federal government, if you really wanted to screw over your people, you have to be really careful because they have the ability to actually just rise up against you. And I think as much as the left makes that argument, like, no, it's supposed to be militias and military.
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling that might have even been the founding fathers' idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, your local people are your military.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, if the government's ever tyrannical,
Mm-hmm.
you guys group up, you go get your F-18s, and you go and you make them not be tyrannical. Now, that's not how it's set up now anymore.
No.
For whatever reason, and maybe that's better, maybe it's worse. I don't know. I actually haven't really thought that one through too much.
Mm-hmm.
But I would wonder if you had that set up in Switzerland, if it would be a problem, or if it really would just be that the government then tiptoes around the people a lot more. And this comes back to the culture question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be Somalia? Or is it going to be still quite civilized? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it'll be as civilized as the government makes it. As in, if the government becomes tyrannical, they'll see just how civilized the Swiss really are.
Exactly. Well, and this goes back to what you were saying earlier about the protests in Canada, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that was an armed populace,
right,
who were peacefully still
Yeah.
peacefully demonstrating their opposition to this,
mm-hmm.
well, you know what? The government would have had to be much more careful in how they
Yeah.
de-escalated that situation. So
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely an argument to be made. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. I don't have an answer other than that.
Yeah,
Stuff to think about.
it is.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Arthur.
Yeah, it was great talking,
Yeah,
as usual.
it was a cool conversation, for sure.
That was fun.
And
All right, guys.
as always, to all those who are watching, thanks for watching, and hope to see you in 2 weeks. Are we doing the next one in 2 weeks?
Yeah, we're looking into changing up the schedule a little bit. So, yeah, we'll let you know on Twitter what we do. Might be in a week or 2 weeks. Yeah, so follow us on Twitter if you want to be notified of that, or on any of our social media.
Mm-hmm.
You can find that there.
Down. And like, share, and subscribe if you care.
And if you thought anything about what we said, if you had any thought whatsoever, let us know. Feedback, all of that. We want to hear.
Yeah. Cool.
And if you want to come on the podcast, I didn't put this in the description. I'll put it in the description after, of a form you can fill out if you have suggestions, feedback, or any of that.
We're working on streamlining the way that guests can come on. We're trying to increase the guest pool and make it more sort of a flowing thing where people can just jump in on topics that they are interested in. So we're working on that.
Yes, sir.
Good stuff.
Okay, so
enjoy your Sunday then, Arthur.
Yeah.
Are you gonna go out and do some shooting? Bears.
All this
I'm
talk
talking
of
bears.
shooting makes me really want to.
All right, guys.
All right.
Have a good one.
Take care.
Cheers.